Your campaign was finally working. ROAS looked strong. Sales were increasing. The client felt excited. So naturally, you decided to scale. More budget, more reach, more growth. And honestly, at first, it feels like the right decision. Because if a campaign is already profitable, spending more should create even better results. But then something frustrating starts happening. Costs begin rising unexpectedly. Conversions slow down. ROAS starts collapsing. And suddenly, the campaign that looks successful no longer behaves the same way at all. Now, the pressure increases very quickly because the client starts asking questions immediately. Why did performance suddenly drop? Was scaling a mistake? Are we losing money now? And honestly, this is one of the most stressful moments in Facebook advertising because scaling looks simple from the outside. But many campaigns quietly break when growth happens too aggressively. Now, this is where many marketers panic. They start changing creatives, reducing budgets, changing audiences rapidly, hoping performance suddenly stabilizes again. But many times, the real problem started the moment scaling changed the behavior of the campaign itself. If you've ever experienced strong ROAS collapsing after increasing budgets, you're definitely not alone. Because this happens constantly in meta advertising. And in this video, we're going to break down why ROAS drops after scaling, what mistakes quietly destroy campaign stability, and how experienced marketers scale campaigns without emotionally damaging performance. Because once you understand this properly, you stop treating scaling like a simple budget increase and start understanding it as a completely different optimization phase altogether. One of the biggest misunderstandings in Facebook advertising is believing that scaling only increases results proportionally. And honestly, this assumption quietly destroys many profitable campaigns. Because once budgets increase aggressively, the campaign itself starts behaving differently. At first, scaling feels exciting. The campaign is profitable. ROAS looks stable. Sales are increasing consistently. So emotionally, increasing the budget feels completely logical. But Facebook's delivery system does not always scale smoothly. And this is where many marketers get surprised. As budgets increase, Facebook often starts searching for larger pools of traffic quickly. Audience behavior shifts. Delivery patterns change. Traffic quality may begin weakening, and slowly, the balance that originally made the campaign profitable starts changing underneath. Now something confusing happens. The campaign still spends more money, but efficiency no longer behaves the same way. Costs rise faster. Conversions become inconsistent. ROAS starts fluctuating aggressively. And many marketers panic at this stage because they assume something suddenly broke. But many times, the campaign is simply operating in a completely different optimization environment after scaling. This is why experienced marketers treat scaling as a separate phase entirely, not just more budget. Because once spend increases significantly, Facebook starts making different delivery decisions behind the scenes. And if scaling happens too aggressively, the system may lose stability before it fully adapts to the larger budget environment. One of the biggest reasons ROAS drops after scaling is that Facebook often starts expanding into weaker traffic pools. And honestly, this happens much faster than many marketers expect. At smaller budgets, Facebook usually has enough high-quality users available to maintain strong efficiency. The system can stay selective, the audience quality stays stronger, and performance often feels stable. But once budgets increase aggressively, Facebook suddenly needs much more traffic very quickly. And this is where campaign behavior starts changing underneath. Because now the algorithm begins searching beyond the original high-performing audience pool. Traffic expands wider, audience intent weakens, conversion consistency starts changing, and slowly, the campaign begins attracting colder users who are less likely to buy. Now something confusing happens. The campaign still spends successfully. Traffic volume may even increase significantly. But underneath, the quality of buyers starts declining. This is why many marketers feel shocked after scaling. Because from the outside, the campaign still looks active. But emotionally, the traffic no longer behaves the same way as before. This becomes especially dangerous when marketers continue forcing aggressive budget increases during unstable performance. Because over time, Facebook may prioritize easier traffic expansion over maintaining strong buyer quality. This is why experienced marketers scale gradually. Not emotionally, they monitor conversion quality, buyer behavior, audience stability, ROAS consistency. Because scaling successfully is not just about reaching more people. It's about protecting the quality of the people entering the campaign while growth happens. Another major reason ROAS drops after scaling is audience saturation. And honestly, scaling usually accelerates this problem much faster than most marketers expect. At first, the campaign performs well because Facebook is showing ads to highly responsive users. The audience feels fresh, attention stays strong, conversions happen consistently. But once budgets increase aggressively, the same audience often starts seeing the ads much more frequently. Now frequency rises quickly, fresh attention becomes harder to maintain, and slowly, audience behavior starts changing underneath the campaign. At first, people still engage, but over time, attention weakens, curiosity drops, response quality declines, and eventually, the campaign begins losing momentum even if the ads themselves still look active. This becomes even more dangerous during long-running campaigns with repetitive creatives, because scaling increases exposure pressure significantly, and when the same users repeatedly see similar messaging, emotional responsiveness starts fading much faster. Now something frustrating happens. The campaign may still generate clicks, but conversion quality slowly weakens underneath. This is why many marketers feel confused after scaling, because performance decay often happens gradually instead of instantly. And if saturation is ignored too long, ROAS can collapse before the problem becomes obvious emotionally. This is why experienced marketers monitor audience freshness constantly during scaling phases. Not just spend levels. They watch frequency, engagement quality, conversion consistency, audience fatigue patterns. Because successful scaling is not only about increasing reach, it's about protecting audience responsiveness while the campaign grows. One of the fastest ways to destroy a profitable Facebook campaign is scaling emotionally instead of strategically. And honestly, this happens constantly after early success. At first, the campaign performs well. ROAS looks exciting. Sales increase, confidence grows quickly. And naturally, marketers feel pressure to scale faster because emotionally, strong results create urgency. The client wants more growth. Budgets increase aggressively. Expectations rise immediately. But then something dangerous starts happening. As performance becomes unstable, many marketers begin reacting emotionally to every fluctuation. One bad day, budgets get reduced. One strong day, budgets increase aggressively again. New creatives launch suddenly. Targeting changes rapidly. And slowly, the campaign loses stability completely. Now Facebook's system struggles to adapt consistently. Learning patterns keep shifting. Audience behavior becomes unpredictable. And instead of controlled growth, the campaign enters a cycle of constant instability. This is why experienced marketers scale very differently. Not emotionally, they understand that scaling naturally creates volatility. So instead of reacting aggressively to every short-term fluctuation, they focus on protecting long-term campaign stability first. They scale gradually, monitor consistency carefully, allow the system enough time to stabilize properly. Because successful scaling is not about chasing emotional excitement. It's about managing growth without destroying the campaign structure underneath. And honestly, many profitable campaigns do not collapse because scaling was impossible. They collapse because emotional reactions slowly destabilize the system after growth began. Another major reason ROAS drops after scaling is that creatives often fatigue much faster once campaigns expand aggressively. And honestly, many marketers underestimate how quickly this happens. At smaller budgets, Facebook can distribute ads more selectively. The audience exposure stays controlled. Attention remains stronger for longer periods, and creatives often maintain stable performance. But once scaling begins aggressively, exposure pressure increases dramatically. More people see the same ad repeatedly. Frequency rises faster. Audience responsiveness starts weakening sooner. And slowly, the emotional impact of the creative begins fading underneath the campaign. Now something frustrating starts happening. The ad may still generate impressions. Traffic may still continue. But emotionally, people stop reacting the same way as before. The hook feels familiar. The message feels repetitive. The urgency weakens. And over time, the campaign starts losing conversion momentum, even if the creative technically remains active. This becomes especially dangerous when marketers continue scaling without refreshing creatives properly. Because Facebook keeps pushing the same messaging harder and harder into the audience. And eventually, attention fatigue starts damaging ROAS much faster than expected. This is why experienced marketers constantly monitor creative responsiveness during scaling phases. Not just spend or clicks. They study engagement quality, audience response patterns, conversion consistency, fatigue signals. Because successful scaling is not only about expanding reach, it's about maintaining emotional responsiveness while exposure increases. And honestly, many campaigns don't fail because scaling itself was wrong. They fail because the creative could not emotionally sustain the larger exposure pressure afterward. One of the hardest parts about scaling Facebook campaigns is not always the technical side of scaling itself. Sometimes, the real pressure comes from client expectations. At first, performance looks exciting. ROAS is strong. Sales increase. Confidence grows quickly. And naturally, clients want even faster growth immediately. Higher budgets, more leads, more revenue. But once performance starts fluctuating after scaling, emotional pressure increases very quickly. Clients start asking difficult questions. Why is ROAS dropping? Why are costs increasing? Should we keep scaling or stop? And honestly, this is where many marketers begin making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. Because when client pressure builds, doing something feels emotionally safer than staying patient. So budgets change constantly. New creatives launch too quickly. Targeting shifts aggressively. And slowly, the campaign becomes more unstable underneath. This is why experienced marketers manage communication very carefully during scaling phases, not just campaign performance, because scaling naturally creates volatility. And if expectations are not managed properly, emotional pressure starts controlling optimization decisions. Experienced marketers explain this early. They prepare clients for fluctuations. They explain stability phases. They focus on long-term efficiency instead of emotional daily reactions. Because successful scaling is not just about increasing spend. It's about maintaining strategic thinking while pressure increases around the campaign. And honestly, many profitable campaigns don't collapse because scaling failed technically. They collapse because emotional pressure slowly destroyed decision-making quality afterward. One of the biggest mistakes marketers make during scaling is reacting emotionally to short-term ROAS fluctuations. And honestly, this quietly destroys many campaigns that could have scaled successfully over time. Because once budgets increase, performance naturally becomes less predictable in the short term. Costs fluctuate more, traffic behavior changes, audience response becomes less stable temporarily. And emotionally, this uncertainty becomes very uncomfortable for marketers and clients. So many people start obsessing over daily performance constantly. One bad day creates panic. One strong day creates overconfidence. And suddenly, optimization decisions start becoming emotional instead of strategic. Budgets increase too quickly. Budgets get reduced too aggressively. Campaign structures keep changing constantly. Now something dangerous starts happening underneath. The campaign loses consistency. Facebook's system struggles to stabilize properly. Learning patterns keep shifting. And instead of controlled scaling, the campaign enters a cycle of emotional volatility. This is why experienced marketers think differently during scaling phases. They focus more on broader performance patterns, not emotional reactions to daily fluctuations. They analyze weekly trends, conversion consistency, customer quality, long-term efficiency, because scaling successfully requires tolerance for temporary instability. And honestly, many campaigns don't fail because scaling was impossible. They fail because marketers emotionally chased perfect daily ROAS during a naturally volatile growth phase. This is why experienced advertisers stay calmer during scaling periods, because they understand something important. Stable long-term growth rarely looks emotionally stable day by day. When experienced marketers scale profitable Facebook campaigns, they usually approach the process very differently from beginners, because beginners often treat scaling like a simple budget increase. But experienced marketers understand something important. Scaling changes the entire optimization environment underneath the campaign. So instead of chasing aggressive growth emotionally, they focus first on protecting stability. At the beginning of scaling, they monitor how the system reacts carefully, not just revenue. They study buyer quality, conversion consistency, traffic behavior, audience responsiveness, because maintaining performance during growth matters more than temporary emotional excitement. Experienced marketers also scale gradually whenever possible, not because growth is bad, but because stability needs time to adapt to larger budget environments. They avoid reacting emotionally to short-term fluctuations. Instead, they analyze broader behavioral patterns over time. This becomes especially important during periods of volatility, because scaling naturally creates instability inside Facebook's delivery system. And if marketers overreact constantly, the campaign often becomes harder to stabilize afterward. This is also why experienced advertisers prepare for creative fatigue early. They refresh messaging proactively, test new creative angles, expand audiences strategically, because sustainable scaling requires maintaining audience responsiveness while exposure grows. And honestly, this is one of the biggest differences between emotional scaling and professional scaling. Beginners chase growth aggressively. Experienced marketers protect campaign stability while growth happens. Because long-term scaling success is not just about increasing spend. It's about increasing spend without emotionally damaging the system underneath. One of the biggest realizations experienced marketers eventually learn about scaling is that many Facebook campaigns collapse emotionally before they collapse technically. And honestly, this changes the way professional advertisers handle volatility completely. Because once ROAS starts fluctuating after scaling, emotional pressure increases everywhere at the same time. Clients become anxious, budgets feel heavier, daily performance starts feeling unpredictable, and naturally, fear starts influencing decision-making very quickly. Now many marketers begin reacting emotionally to every fluctuation they see. One weak day creates panic. One strong day creates overconfidence. And slowly, the campaign enters a cycle of emotional instability underneath. Budgets keep changing, creatives rotate too aggressively, targeting structures shift constantly. Now something dangerous happens. The system no longer gets enough consistency to stabilize properly. And instead of controlled scaling, the campaign becomes increasingly chaotic. This is why experienced marketers behave very differently during unstable scaling phases. Instead of chasing emotional certainty, they focus on maintaining strategic clarity under pressure because they understand something important. Scaling naturally creates periods of volatility. Temporary instability does not automatically mean the campaign is failing completely. And honestly, many campaigns that could have recovered successfully get emotionally destroyed before the system ever had time to stabilize properly. This is why emotional discipline becomes so important during scaling phases. Because successful scaling is not just about understanding Facebook ads technically. It's about staying strategically clear while uncertainty still exists. And honestly, this becomes one of the biggest differences between beginner marketers and experienced advertisers over time. Beginners often react emotionally to volatility. Experienced marketers manage volatility without emotionally collapsing underneath the pressure. One of the biggest mindset shifts in Facebook advertising is realizing that scaling and sustainable growth are not always the same thing. And honestly, many marketers only fully understand this after experiencing unstable ROAS themselves. At the beginning of scaling, growth feels exciting. Higher budgets, more sales, more momentum, and emotionally, fast expansion feels like success. But over time, experienced marketers begin realizing something much deeper. Sustainable growth depends on stability, not emotional acceleration. Because once campaigns scale aggressively, everything inside the system becomes more sensitive. Traffic quality shifts faster. Audience fatigue increases faster. Creative responsiveness weakens faster. And if marketers react emotionally to every fluctuation, the campaign slowly loses consistency underneath. This is why experienced advertisers think differently during growth phases. Instead of chasing perfect short-term ROAS every day, they focus on maintaining strong systems over longer periods of time. They protect audience quality, creative freshness, conversion consistency, strategic stability. Because successful scaling is not just about spending more money successfully. It's about maintaining healthy performance while the campaign environment keeps evolving. And honestly, this becomes one of the biggest differences between temporary growth and sustainable growth over time. Beginners often scale emotionally after success. Experienced marketers scale carefully while protecting long-term efficiency underneath. Because real Facebook advertising success is not just about creating momentum quickly. It's about managing growth without emotionally destabilizing the system itself. And once marketers truly understand this, scaling stops feeling like emotional gambling and starts becoming a much more controlled strategic process. Now, if this video helped you understand why ROAS drops after scaling, make sure to explore the other videos already available on the channel as well. We've also started breaking down Meta ads instability, Facebook conversion problems, scaling psychology, campaign recovery thinking, and deeper digital marketing execution strategies. Because once you understand how these systems connect together, you stop reacting emotionally to campaign volatility and start managing growth much more strategically over time. Thanks for watching, stay connected, and I'll see you in the next video.